Of all the changes that we've all experienced, they all have this in common. Every single one of them has a starting point, an ending point, and a process of transition in between. Whether long or short, that in between space can get a little tricky. So it's important, before we find ourselves there again, to think about how to navigate that space intentionally and effectively. Let's talk about it today on the Living Chronic Faith podcast. Hi, I'm Allie, and I'm Living Chronic Faith. Thanks for stopping by, and welcome to the podcast. The name says it all. I believe that our faith has to be as chronic as our symptoms, and this podcast is a safe space for us to explore meaningful ways to live our lives according to that faith. It's my prayer that after this episode, you will be more encouraged, more educated, and more equipped to live out your chronic faith. Hi, I'm Allie, and welcome to the Living Chronic Faith podcast. We are here on the first Friday of every month, and we would love for you to join us. So if this content resonates with you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can be notified every single time we post. And if you're ready to join the LCF family, or if you just want to know more about what we have going on, please feel free to visit us at www.livingchronicfaith.com. Today, we are talking about a subject that everybody can relate to: change. Change is inevitable. And there are people who love change and people who hate it. I think we all know somebody who's always rearranging the furniture in their house or always dyeing their hair a different color. We also all probably know someone who has meatloaf every Monday, tacos every Tuesday, and so on and so on. And there's nothing wrong with either one. The truth is that change tends to bring with it mixed emotions, because no matter how good the change is, you have to let go of something. A routine, a relationship, a comfort level. It's graduation season right now, and lots of students are so excited and so proud of their accomplishments, and they're looking forward to the next chapter of life. But having to leave their friends behind, and maybe having favorite teachers that you really grew close to, can be difficult. If a student is popular or high achieving, they are called the big fish in the small pond, right? But moving on to college or into the job market, you might find that you're a much smaller fish in a much larger pond. And even parents, as proud and relieved as they may be that their kid is finally graduating, as much as they enjoy seeing their kid thrive and succeed, there is still a letting go of their child, their baby, those precious moments that they realize they will never have again. Yeah, they may have complained over the years about having to cook dinner every day and having to do laundry several times a week. But once the child goes off into the world, the parent may find that they miss those tasks. They've become part of their normal. And we like normal. Chronic illness brings about a lot of changes too. It's not something that we can control. We didn't get to choose a diagnosis, and it's hard. It's hard seeing the changes to your hair and your skin and your weight. It's hard suddenly not having the energy to do all the things that you normally would do. Daily tasks, mundane stuff. To not be as spontaneous as you might like to be, or to not be able to plan as far in advance as you would like to. We hate having to ask for help. But this brings me right back to my very first statement. Change is inevitable. Even without a chronic diagnosis, just like a car or a house, our bodies will sustain normal wear and tear. And there will be a need at some point to slow down or to do things differently. A neighbor may move away. Prices will go up. Loved ones will pass away. And we will have to deal with the change that comes along with it. Unfortunately, sometimes when these changes happen, it's easy to get stuck between the letting go and the embracing of the new. I think that's the key to navigating change well, is it's what happens in the in-between places. The in-between is so unfamiliar and sometimes intimidating. You've gotten comfortable with what was, what's always been in some cases, and you have no idea what to expect out of this new shift. And in that moment when what worked before no longer applies, but there's no frame of reference for what happens next, we freeze. We shelter in place, afraid to fail or make a mistake. The longer we stay frozen, however, the less we're living the life that God dreamt for us. Stagnation can set in. That's what happens when we get stuck in the in-between. Dreams die in the in-between. Relationships unravel in the in-between. Faith falters. Purpose is backburnered. Hope gets deferred. And the Bible tells us that makes the heart sick. So what do we do in the in-between? Well, the first thing is to stay focused on the light. The psalmist writes, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." I'm so grateful that the word of God speaks to every situation we will ever face. The implication of this, though, is that a lamp near your feet is only going to be sufficient to illuminate the next step or two, the area immediately around you, to keep you from inadvertently stepping into a hole or on a scorpion, but it won't necessarily light up the entire path. And I think that's the correlation for us, that as we walk with the Lord, there will be times when we can't see the entire path before us. We might not know the whole plan. How frustrating is that? All we get is the next step, maybe two, and if you are a planner, that's going to drive you up a wall. Speaking from experience. But what it teaches us, however, is to stay focused on our light source, Jesus, the light of the world. We got to keep our eyes fixed on him. Lean into his word for direction. When we are dependent on his light for our safety and guidance, it means we can't afford to look around at what everyone else is doing. The second thing is we have to make sure to take the time to grieve the loss. Allow ourselves the space and the grace to mourn when things have changed. Because again, with every change, there comes a shift, something that we're having to give up, something familiar that potentially is going away in some way. Whether it's a loved one, an opportunity, your mobility, your job, a relationship, or maybe your independence. Whether it was by choice or by chance, if we have to let something go, it can affect us emotionally. Can I just tell you that it's okay? That God can handle our big emotions, that it's okay to feel sad, angry, frustrated, confused, hurt. It's also okay to feel relieved, free, content, peaceful, renewed, all at the same time. God can handle our tears and our lament. Grief and gratitude can exist at the same time. We don't have to pick just one. He understands everything that we're feeling all the time. And he wants us to bring it all to him. Trust me. He doesn't need us to protect him. We can cry one minute, laugh the next, scream in our pillow later on the same day. We can talk through it today, keep to ourselves tomorrow. Grief is a process, and you deserve to find healthy ways to work through it. You don't have to do it like anybody else. You don't have to be a hero or pretend that everything is okay when it feels like your world is falling apart. What I recommend that you do in that moment is lean on your support system. Talk about your feelings. This is a public service announcement for therapy, life coaching, pastoral counseling, something that will help you not keep all these things bottled up inside. We all need someone who can be a safe space for us to process what's happening in our world. Holding it in or ignoring it may seem effective in the moment, but mark my words, that emotion is going to find its way out, sometimes at the most inopportune moments. So we have to manage it intentionally. Which brings me to my next point. We have to manage what we can't control. A medical diagnosis can be very unpredictable. Even with things that we know can happen, until we get diagnosed, we don't necessarily know that it will happen to us. But once we know what's going on, once we have a diagnosis, we can do something about it. We may not be able to reverse or cure it, but we can be intentional about how we steward what we do have. Ecclesiastes 9:4 says, "Anyone who is among the living has hope. Even a live dog is better off than a dead lion." Wow. Well, just give it to us straight then. Even a live dog is better off than a dead lion. Now, this, of course, is around a culture that did not see dogs as the fur babies and the pets that we now see people looking at dogs as. Dogs were low. They were begging for scraps. This is the position that dogs held at that time. And they're saying even a live dog has hope. More so than the king of the jungle with its mighty roar after it has died. What have you decided to do with the life that God has entrusted to you? It may not be the same as the life you lived before, but you have some decisions to make about what to do with the energy He's given to you, with the voice He's given to you, with the friends He's given to you, with the abilities and the gifts and the skills that He has given to you. What are you going to do with those now? You still have something to offer this world. You still have something to return to God. And we are called to be good stewards of all of those things on purpose. So, my last point is that we have a responsibility as we grieve what we have lost to not neglect what we still have. In the book of Revelation, Jesus himself has given revelation to John, and he has instructed him to write down what is revealed to him on a scroll and send it to the 7 churches of Asia. In the 3rd chapter, John is writing to the church at Sardis, which is in the western part of modern-day Turkey, in case you were curious. But Sardis, the church, had a reputation for flourishing. They were the model assembly. They had unity among the brethren, purity of heart, enthusiasm about the assignment that God had given to them. They were ideal on the surface. But individually and collectively, the people's fire was slowly getting close to dying out. But God said their work was not finished. Their gifts were not gone. The people were not depleted. So the message to the church was this: wake up, strengthen what remains and is about to die. For I have found your deeds unfinished in the sight of my God. John says Jesus is looking at this church like a campfire that hasn't been stirred up or stoked in a long time. What was once a roaring flame has diminished to a flicker because it hasn't been properly maintained. So God says to the church, wake up before it's too late. There's still time to fan the flame. There's still time to function in your calling. I have not repossessed your purpose. You're still equipped for the assignment. For many people facing major challenges like a chronic diagnosis, there are so many things to be preoccupied by. We've got to keep making sure that our medication is taken on schedule. that we have eaten the right things, that we have moved enough, that we have scheduled all the appointments, and that we have arrived on time or 15 minutes early, that we've done all of the paperwork, that we have contacted the insurance company again. Who has time to figure out anything else? Who has time to figure out how to pursue the calling of God on my life when my life is so full of concerns, issues, change? If we're honest, we sometimes find ourselves asking God, if you have work for me to do, why would you allow something to happen that makes it so much harder? And that's a fair question. And I don't pretend to speak for God, but His word tells us that His strength becomes perfected in our weakness. In other words, the less ability that we think we have to do it ourselves, the more we'll look to Him. The less capacity we have to do something, the more we acknowledge that it has to be God doing it through us. We are vessels, after all. We're not expected to do any of it in our own strength, but the more confident we are in our abilities, the less room we tend to make for the Holy Spirit to work in and through our lives. Not only does the challenge not disqualify you, it doesn't have to delay you either. You don't have to wait until the divorce is finalized, or you lose the 30 pounds, or the kids graduate, or the treatment starts working. When God created you, you came fully loaded with the skills that you needed for the assignment. So even in those in-between places when we're not quite sure what to do, you have purpose. Even in the lowest moments, you have value. Even as you grieve the loss, God calls us to strengthen what remains. He doesn't ask us to ignore the hurt or pretend it's not hard. But He wants every pain and struggle to remind us that His yoke is easy and His burden is light. So if the task is too hard, or if you're about ready to give up, that's a good indicator that you might be trying to do it yourself instead of allowing God to do the heavy lifting. So what do we do when we find ourselves mid-transition, unable to go back and unsure how to go forward? What do we do when we're at the mercy of all the implications of change? How do we navigate the in-between? Stay focused on the light. Keep your eyes on Jesus, the light of the world. Give yourself space and grace to grieve the loss in healthy ways. Manage those things that you cannot control. Be a good steward of everything that God has entrusted to you, and strengthen what remains. Do not forget that you still have purpose and that God has a plan for you. I pray that as you navigate change, as you navigate the in-betweens that may be happening now or may be coming in the future, that you'll remember to stay focused on the light and to never forget that God has created you with purpose, and that the change doesn't disqualify you and it doesn't have to delay you. He will lead you through the in-between. I love you. I'm praying for you. I hope to see you next time. Talk to you soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. If you want to stay up to date on what's happening in the LCF community, or for more faith-first chronic diagnosis content, please visit our website at livingchronicfaith.com. And while you're there, consider registering for membership free of charge. Also, check us out on Instagram and YouTube at Living Chronic Faith. Be sure to follow and subscribe. Remember that I'm praying for you. Yes, you. And until next time, always expect great things. Talk to you soon.